My son brought home a permission slip for a field trip I already chaperoned last week, except the trip isn't scheduled until next month. I stared at the crumpled paper in his backpack. The zoo. Ms. Holloway's class. Same date I'd written in my calendar last Tuesday when I'd spent 6 hours herding fourth graders through the reptile house. I still had the visitor sticker on my jacket. When is this? I asked him. Next month, February 14th. Can you come? February 14th. That was last week. Today was February 21st. And you haven't gone yet? He gave me that look kids give when their parents say something stupid. Mom, it's in 3 weeks. Ms. Holloway just handed them out today. I pulled out my phone. There I was at the zoo entrance with Ms. Holloway's class. Timestamp, February 14th, 11:24 a.m. There was my son standing next to his best friend Evan, both wearing their school shirts. I showed him the photo. His face went pale. That's not me. What do you mean? I don't have that shirt anymore. I lost it in December. He was right. We'd torn the house apart looking for it. I zoomed in. Same crooked smile, same scar above his eyebrow, same way he stood with his weight on one leg. That night, I called Evan's mom. Did you chaperone the zoo trip last week? What zoo trip? Ms. Holloway's class. February 14th. Long pause. Mara, that's next month. I literally just signed the permission slip tonight. I hung up and checked the calendar on my fridge. February 14th had a big red circle. Zoo trip, 9 a.m. in my handwriting. But according to everyone else, it hadn't happened yet. I opened my photos again. Dozens of pictures from that day. My son feeding a giraffe. Ms. Holloway explaining something to the group. Kids crowded around the penguin exhibit. Except when I checked social media, they weren't there. No posts from February 14th at all. My husband came home from his business trip that night. How was your week? Did I chaperone a field trip last Tuesday? He thought for a moment. No, you were home. We had dinner together. You sure? Positive? Why? I showed him the photos. His face did something strange, not confused, something else, something that made my stomach drop. Where did you get these? He asked quietly. I took them. At the zoo. Last week. He set down his suitcase very carefully. We need to talk. He pulled out his phone, showed me a text conversation, with me, from last Tuesday. We'd been messaging throughout the day about laundry and grocery shopping, but I'd been at the zoo. I'd been chaperoning. I had the photos to prove it. This isn't the first time, he said. The first time what? That you've remembered things that didn't happen. The room tilted. What are you talking about? He pulled up more messages, more photos, documentation spanning back months. I've been tracking it. You'll have complete memories of days that never occurred. At first I thought it was stress, but it's getting worse. That's not possible. 3 weeks ago you told me about your dad's funeral. Cried for hours. But your dad's alive. I called him. I felt cold. You're lying. Call him right now. I did. My father answered on the second ring. Alive. Healthy. Confused why I was calling so late. When I hung up, my husband was watching me with this terrible expression, like he was mourning something. I think we need to see someone, he said. A specialist. I'm not crazy. I never said you were, but something's happening. I looked at the permission slip on the counter. At my son's signature at the bottom, giving consent for a field trip that, according to everyone but me, hasn't happened yet. If the trip's in 3 weeks, I whispered, then why do I remember every single detail? He didn't have an answer. Neither did I. But I knew one thing for certain. In 3 weeks, I'd be at that zoo, and I'd find out if I was losing my mind, or if something much worse was happening. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every moment from that zoo trip. The weight of Ms. Holloway's clipboard in my hands, the way the giraffe's tongue felt rough against my palm, the smell of popcorn from the concession stand, the exact pitch of my son's laughter when the penguins dove into their pool. These weren't fragments. They were complete. Solid. Real. I went to my laptop and opened the folder where I'd dumped all the zoo photos. Scrolled through them slowly. In one picture, there was a woman in the background. Dark hair. Sunglasses. She was looking directly at the camera. Directly at me. I didn't remember her. I zoomed in. Her mouth was slightly open like she was about to say something. Behind her, barely visible, was part of a sign. I enhanced the image until I could read it. Temporary exhibit. Memory and time. A neuroscience journey. My blood went cold. I grabbed my phone and searched the zoo's website. No mention of any exhibit about memory. No mention of any temporary exhibits at all. I called the zoo directly. Hi. This is going to sound strange, but do you have an exhibit about memory and neuroscience? The woman on the phone paused. No, ma'am. Our exhibits are all animal-focused. Always have been. You're sure? Maybe something that was there briefly? I've worked here 12 years. Never had anything like that. I hung up, stared at the photo. The sign was clear as day. My husband found me at 3 a.m., still at the computer. Mara, you need to rest. There's a woman in this photo. I don't know who she is. He looked over my shoulder. Which woman? I pointed. He squinted. I don't see anyone. Right there. Dark hair, sunglasses, looking at the camera. Baby, there's no one there. Just the exhibit sign and some penguins. I looked again. The woman was gone. Just like he said. Background. Penguins. Sign. No woman. She was there, I whispered. I saw her. His hand on my shoulder felt heavy. Final. We're calling Dr. Patterson in the morning. Dr. Patterson was a neurologist my husband had already researched, already contacted, already scheduled me with. This bothered me more than anything else. How long had he been planning this? The appointment was in 3 days. Wednesday afternoon. Just some standard tests, my husband promised. Rule out anything physical. But I knew what he was thinking. Early onset Alzheimer's, brain tumor, schizophrenia, something that would explain why I was living days that never happened. I went to work the next morning. I'm a librarian at the county library. Have been for 9 years. Safe job, quiet job, surrounded by facts and information and truth. I was reshelving books in the history section when I noticed something wrong. A book that shouldn't be there. The Temporal Displacement Effect, a study of memory divergence by Dr. Helena Voss. I'd never seen it before. The spine was worn, like it had been checked out many times. I pulled it off the shelf. The checkout card inside showed it had been borrowed 47 times. All by the same person, Mara Hendricks. Me. I'd never checked out this book, never even heard of it. But there was my signature, 47 times. Dating back 3 years. The most recent was last week, February 14th, the day of the zoo trip that didn't happen. My hand shook as I opened the book. The first chapter was titled, Living in Two Timelines. I started reading. Dr. Voss described a phenomenon where certain individuals experience events in a timeline separate from everyone else. They live moments that are real to them, but never occurred in the primary timeline. She called them displaced persons. The book was published in 1987. I'd been born in 1986, which meant this book was older than me. But it looked almost new. I flipped to the back cover. No barcode, no library stamp, just a note written in pen. For Mara. You're not crazy, you're awake. HV. I dropped the book. It hit the floor with a sound too loud for a library. But no one looked up. No one turned. I was surrounded by patrons, and they were all frozen. Mid-step, mid-reach, mid-breath. Except for one. The woman from the zoo photo. Dark hair, sunglasses, sitting at a table near the window. She lowered her sunglasses. Her eyes were the wrong color. Not brown or blue or green. Something else. Something that hurt to look at. Hello, Mara, she said. Her voice echoed wrong, like it was coming from everywhere at once. We need to talk about your son. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. She stood up slowly. The field trip, you remember? It happened, just not in this timeline. What are you talking about? My voice came out strangled. There are many timelines, Mara. Most people only experience one. But you? You're slipping between them. She walked closer. Around her, time was still frozen. A woman reaching for a book. A child mid-laugh. A man turning a page. It started small, she continued. A conversation you had that no one else remembers. A dream that felt too real. But it's accelerating. Soon you'll lose track of which timeline is yours. Why? She smiled. It wasn't comforting. Because of what you're going to do. What you're going to become. I don't understand. You will. On March 14th, when your son's school bus doesn't come home, the room snapped back into motion. Sound rushed in. Movement returned. The woman was gone. I stood there, book at my feet, heart hammering. An elderly man picked it up and handed it to me. You dropped this, dear. I looked at the cover. It wasn't Dr. Voss's book anymore. It was a cookbook. 50 weeknight dinners. No note, no message, just recipes. I checked the history section. No book about temporal displacement. Nothing by Helena Voss. Like it had never existed. I drove home in a daze. March 14th, 3 weeks away. The same day as the zoo trip. The trip that everyone said hadn't happened yet. But I knew it had. I'd lived it. I'd been there. That night, I told my husband about the woman in the library, about the book that changed, about the warning. He held me while I talked. But I could feel him pulling away. Not physically. Emotionally. Like he'd already decided I was lost. The appointment with Dr. Patterson is tomorrow, he said quietly. We moved it up. You're trying to have me committed. I'm trying to help you. By telling doctors I'm insane, by getting you help before something happens, before you hurt yourself, or our son. Those words cut deeper than anything. I would never hurt him. Not intentionally, but Mara, you're not seeing reality anymore. And that makes you dangerous. Dangerous. That's what he thought I was. I went to our son's room. He was asleep, curled up with his stuffed elephant. The one his grandfather gave him. His grandfather who was alive. Not dead. Not buried. I'd cried at a funeral that never happened. Mourned a death that never occurred. What else was I wrong about? I pulled out my phone and looked through my photos again. Hundreds of them. Family dinners, vacations, birthday parties. Which ones were real? Which ones had I imagined? There. Christmas 3 years ago. My son opening presents in our old house. But we'd moved before that Christmas. I remembered because the house sold on December 12th. This photo was dated December 25th, 2 weeks after we'd moved out. I checked the house listing online. It sold on December 12th to the Robinson family. They'd moved in before Christmas, which meant we couldn't have been there on Christmas Day. But I remembered it. The way the morning light came through the kitchen window, the smell of cinnamon rolls, my son's face when he saw the bicycle. All of it vivid, all of it real, all of it impossible. I went through more photos, more memories that didn't match reality. My son's 6th birthday at Chuck E. Cheese. But his 6th birthday had been at home during lockdown. We'd had a Zoom party with family. I had the invitations to prove it. Yet here were photos of him at Chuck E. Cheese, playing games, eating pizza, surrounded by friends, a graduation party for my husband's promotion. But he'd never been promoted. He'd been passed over that year. I remembered his disappointment. Yet here he was in the photos, holding a certificate, smiling. How many of my memories were lies? The next morning, my husband drove me to Dr. Patterson's office. I didn't fight it. I was starting to question everything. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and old magazines. I filled out forms asking about my medical history, family history of mental illness, recent stressors, hallucinations. I checked boxes, answered questions, became a case study. Dr. Patterson was younger than I expected, mid-40s, kind eyes, the type of person who'd been trained to look sympathetic while diagnosing you with something terrible. Tell me what's been happening, she said. So I did. The zoo trip, the photos, the timeline discrepancies, my father's funeral, the book in the library, the woman with the wrong-colored eyes. She took notes, asked clarifying questions, never once looked at me like I was crazy. Have you experienced any headaches, vision problems, seizures? No. Any family history of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder? Not that I know of. When did you first notice these discrepancies? I thought about it. Really thought. Maybe 2 years ago? I mentioned a conversation to a friend. She had no memory of it. I assumed she'd forgotten, but now I'm not sure. Dr. Patterson ordered tests. MRI, EEG, blood work. We'll rule out physical causes first, she explained. Tumors, lesions, seizure disorders, chemical imbalances. And if you don't find anything, then we'll explore other options. Other options meant psychiatric medication, therapy, maybe hospitalization. I nodded like this was reasonable, like I wasn't terrified. The MRI was scheduled for Friday, 2 days away. In the meantime, I was supposed to keep a journal, document every memory that seemed questionable, every moment that didn't align with everyone else's reality. I started that night, wrote down everything I could remember that others denied. The list was longer than I expected. My son's first word. I remembered mama. My husband remembered Dada, a vacation to Florida. I remembered Disney World. My husband remembered Universal Studios. My best friend's wedding. I remembered a beachside ceremony. She'd gotten married in a courthouse. On and on. Little things, big things, an entire life that didn't match up. By Friday, I'd filled 30 pages. Dr. Patterson read through them while I lay in the MRI machine. The rhythmic thumping felt like a countdown. When it was over, she showed me the results. My brain was normal. No tumors, no lesions, no structural abnormalities of any kind. That's good news, she said. But her expression said otherwise. So what's wrong with me? She chose her words carefully. I'm going to refer you to a colleague, Dr. Chen. She specializes in dissociative disorders and memory processing issues. You think I'm making this up? I think your brain is processing reality differently than others. Why that is, I can't say. She prescribed medication anyway. Something to help with anxiety, to stabilize my mood. I filled the prescription but didn't take it. I needed my mind clear. March 14th was 1 week away. I started watching my son more carefully, noticing things. The way he'd stare at nothing, the way he'd answer questions I hadn't asked out loud, the way he'd mention things that hadn't happened yet. Dad's going to be late tonight, he said over breakfast on Monday. How do you know? He just is. My husband came home 3 hours late, apologetic. His meeting had run over. Tuesday. We're having tacos for dinner. I hadn't planned dinner yet, but when I opened the fridge, ground beef and taco shells were waiting, like I'd bought them without remembering. Wednesday. Grandpa's going to call today. Why would he call? He just is. My father called at 3 p.m. just checking in. Nothing important. Thursday. Mom, why are you looking at me like that? Like what? Like you're scared of me. I wasn't scared of him. I was scared for him. Because if he was like me, if he was slipping between timelines, then that woman's warning meant something terrible. The school bus wouldn't come home. Friday, March 13th, 1 day before. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus. I called the school and offered to pick him up myself on Monday. We'd need written permission from your husband too, the secretary said. School policy. I didn't tell my husband. Didn't want him to think I was being irrational. That night, I barely slept. I kept checking my son's room, making sure he was still there, still solid, still mine. At 3 a.m., I found him awake, sitting up in bed, staring at the wall. Can't sleep? I asked. She's here, he whispered. My skin went cold. Who's here? The lady with the wrong eyes. She says you're going to have to make a choice tomorrow. What choice? He turned to look at me. His pupils were dilated. Wrong. Save me in this timeline or the other one. You can't save me in both. I pulled him into my arms. He was shaking. Or maybe I was. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. But something always happens, Mom. In every timeline. We just have to figure out which something is better. What are you talking about? I know about the other me's. The ones in the other timelines. Sometimes I can feel them. Sometimes we share dreams. Baby, that's not possible. Yes, it is. You do it too. That's why you remember things that didn't happen. They did happen, just not here. He was 7 years old. He shouldn't understand this. Shouldn't be saying these things. How long have you known? Always, I think. But it's getting louder, like the timelines are bleeding into each other. He pulled away and looked at me with eyes too old for his face. Tomorrow, when the bus doesn't come home, you'll understand everything. The lady says it's the only way to wake you up completely. March 14th arrived with deceptive normalcy. Sunny, birds singing. My son ate his cereal like any other morning. Put on his backpack like any other morning. Kissed me goodbye like any other morning. I love you, I said, holding him tighter than usual. I love you too, Mom. See you later. See you later. I watched the bus pull away. Yellow metal carrying my son toward whatever the woman had warned me about. My husband had already left for work. Didn't know I'd called in sick. Didn't know I planned to stay home. Waiting. At 11 a.m., I got a text from Ms. Holloway. Just confirming you're still coming on the field trip today. We're meeting at the zoo entrance at 1 p.m. The zoo trip. It was happening today. Just like I remembered. Just like I'd already lived. I texted back. I'll be there. But I wouldn't be. Because today was also the day my son's bus wouldn't come home. I paced the house. Checked my phone every few minutes. School let out at 3:15 p.m. The bus usually arrived at our stop by 3:35 p.m. I was out there at 3:15 p.m. The other mothers looked at me strangely. Getting an early start? One of them joked. I forced a smile. Waited. 3:30 p.m. came and went. 3:35 p.m. No bus. 3:40 p.m. The other mothers started checking their phones, making calls. 3:45 p.m. The neighborhood was full of anxious parents. I called the school. Busy signal. Called again. Busy signal. At 4 p.m. the police arrived. Something had happened. The bus was missing. All 26 children. The driver. Vanished somewhere between school and our neighborhood. No witnesses. No accident scene. No explanation. They just disappeared. The next 3 hours were chaos. Police interviews, search parties, news cameras, parents screaming, making demands, calling everyone they knew. But I knew the truth. This was what the woman had warned me about. This was the choice. I drove to the zoo. It was closed. Had been closed all day for a private event. But I could see them through the gates. Ms. Holloway's class. All 26 children. Safe. Laughing. Feeding giraffes. My son was there. Standing exactly where I remembered him standing. Wearing the school shirt he'd lost in December. Living the field trip I'd already chaperoned. I climbed the fence. Didn't care about security. Didn't care about cameras. I needed to get to him. But when I dropped down on the other side, everything changed. The zoo was empty. Abandoned. Overgrown with weeds. No children. No animals. Just ruins. Welcome to the other timeline, a voice said. The woman, standing beside me, still wearing those sunglasses. Still wrong. Where's my son? He's where he's supposed to be. The question is, where are you supposed to be? She gestured around us. In this timeline, the bus made it home safely. But you weren't there. You were here, at a zoo trip that never happened, looking for a son who's safe at home. That's not true, isn't it? Check your phone. I did. Messages from my husband, frantic, asking where I was, why I wasn't at the bus stop. Our son was home, safe, wondering where his mother had gone. You're living between timelines, Mara. Every time you remember something that didn't happen, you're accessing memories from another version of yourself. Another timeline. Wait, why is this happening to me? Because you're supposed to prevent something that happens in every timeline we've observed, except one. And to prevent it, you need to be able to navigate between timelines consciously. Prevent what? She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes weren't wrong, they were infinite, containing multitudes. Your son dies on his 12th birthday. In every timeline, a car accident, a drowning, a sudden illness. The cause changes, but the result is always the same. Unless you can learn to see all the timelines at once, to make choices that ripple across realities. My legs gave out. I was kneeling in dead grass. How do I stop it? By accepting what you are. By using the slip consciously. You've been resisting it, fighting it, letting it drive you mad. But if you embrace it, you can see the patterns, the warning signs, the moments where timelines diverge. Who are you? I'm what you'll become. In a timeline 30 years from now. If you succeed. If you save him. I looked at her closely. Same dark hair. Same bone structure. She was me. Older. Changed. You've done this before? I've tried 47 times. This is attempt 48. And you're the closest I've gotten to understanding it fast enough. She helped me stand. The bus made it home safely today. But in 3 timelines over, it didn't. In 7 timelines over, your son wasn't on it because he stayed home sick. In 12 timelines over, there was no field trip at all. How do I know which timeline is real? They're all real. That's the point. You're experiencing them simultaneously. Most people are locked into one perspective, one reality. But you're quantum. You exist in superposition. This is insane. Of course it is. That's why everyone thinks you're crazy. Even your husband. Even you. Most of the time. She handed me something. A small device that looked like a compass. But instead of pointing north, the needle spun wildly. This will help. It reads timeline frequency. The more stable a timeline, the slower the needle spins. Find the timeline where the needle stops completely. That's where you need to be on his 12th birthday. I have 5 years to figure this out? No. You have 3 weeks. Because the timeline branching is accelerating. Soon there will be too many timelines to track. Too many versions of events. You'll lose yourself completely. Scattered across infinite realities. She started to fade. Like she was being pulled away. The next time you feel reality shift, don't fight it. Lean into it. See where it takes you. And remember, you're not crazy. You're just awake. She disappeared. The zoo around me remained empty. Ruined. I climbed back over the fence. When I dropped down on the other side, I was in front of my house. My husband's car was in the driveway. Through the window, I could see my son doing homework at the kitchen table. Safe. Home. Real. I walked inside. Where were you? My husband demanded. I was at the zoo. What zoo? You were supposed to pick up our son. The bus brought him home. Barely. It almost didn't. There was an accident. The bus had to take a detour. He was 45 minutes late. I've been calling you for an hour. I checked my phone. 15 missed calls. All from my husband. I'm sorry, I said automatically. But I wasn't sorry. Because in another timeline, the bus hadn't made it. In another timeline, my son was missing, and somehow, I'd been living both at once. That night, I told my husband about the woman, about the timelines, about what I was. He listened without interrupting. Then he said 3 words. I believe you. I nearly cried. What? I said I believe you. I've been doing research. There's a physicist named Dr. Helena Voss. She wrote about quantum consciousness and timeline perception before she disappeared in 1988. The book I found, it was hers. She had a daughter, also named Helena, who continued her mother's work. Disappeared under mysterious circumstances in 2007. The woman at the zoo. He nodded. If what you're saying is true, then our son is in danger. Real danger. And you're the only one who can see it coming. You don't think I'm crazy? I think you're experiencing something that shouldn't be possible. But I've watched you for months now. The things you remember, the details, they're too specific to be delusions. Too consistent. He pulled me close. So we have 3 weeks to figure out how to use this. How to save our son. We started that night. I'd feel a shift, a moment where reality flickered, and I'd write down everything I noticed. Different clothes on people, different words and conversations, small changes that meant I'd slipped timelines. By the end of the first week, I'd documented 43 timeline shifts. Some lasted seconds, some lasted hours. The longest lasted 2 full days before I snapped back. During that one, my husband and I had never met. Our son didn't exist. I lived alone in an apartment, worked a different job. I'd spent 2 days in that reality, terrified I'd never find my way back. Then I woke up in my own bed, my husband beside me, our son asleep down the hall. Like nothing had happened. You were gone for 40 seconds, my husband said. I lived 2 days. That's the time dilation Dr. Voss wrote about. Time moves differently between timelines. The compass the woman had given me helped. When I felt a shift coming, I'd check it. The needle would spin faster, pointing me toward different timeline frequencies. I learned to follow it, to choose which reality to experience. But it was exhausting. I was living multiple lives simultaneously, working different jobs, having different conversations, experiencing different versions of the same moments. My son's school play happened 7 different ways. In one timeline, he forgot his lines. In another, he was brilliant. In another, the play was canceled due to weather. In another, I wasn't there at all. I was living all of them, all at once. I started seeing the patterns the older Helena had mentioned. Certain moments appeared in every timeline, fixed points. My son's smile was always crooked. My husband's scar on his left hand was always there. These were constants. But other things varied wildly. In some timelines, we lived in different houses. In some, my father was dead. In some, I'd never been a librarian. The variation was dizzying. Week 2, I found the first clue to his 12th birthday. I was in the grocery store checking out when reality shifted. The cashier became someone else. The items in my cart changed, and on the magazine rack near the register, a newspaper with a future date, March 14th, 5 years from now. The headline read, Local boy dies in birthday tragedy. The photo was my son, older, 12, dead. I grabbed the paper, but when I blinked, it was gone. Just regular magazines. The cashier looked at me strangely. Ma'am, your total is 47,563. I showed my husband the compass that night. It reacted in the store, spun so fast I couldn't track it. That was a nexus point, he said, studying the device, a moment where multiple timelines converge. If you can find those points, you can see the common threads, the things that happen in every timeline. He dies in every timeline? According to older Helena, yes, but there must be one where he doesn't. That's why she came back, to help you find it. How? By living through enough timelines that you recognize the pattern, the variable that changes everything. Week 3 arrived too fast. I was getting better at navigating the shifts, but I was also losing myself. Sometimes I'd forget which timeline I was supposed to be in. I'd call my father to ask about his health, forgetting that in this timeline he was alive. I'd mention conversations that hadn't happened yet, events that hadn't occurred. My husband would gently remind me, that was the other timeline, remember? But it was getting harder to tell the difference. My son noticed too. Mom, you seem different. Different how? Like you're here, but not here. Like you're thinking about somewhere else. He was right. I was always thinking about somewhere else. About the infinite versions of this moment happening simultaneously. Do you remember the lady with the wrong eyes? I asked him. He nodded. She comes sometimes, in my dreams. She says you're trying to save me. I am. From what? From something that hasn't happened yet. He processed this with that strange wisdom he'd developed. Do you think it's better to know you're going to die, or to have it be a surprise? Neither. I'm going to prevent it. But what if you can't? What if some things are supposed to happen? Then I'll make sure they happen differently. On March 13th, 5 years from now in most timelines, I marked on my calendar, 1 day before his 12th birthday, 1 day before his death. I had 5 years to prepare, 5 years to learn how to navigate timelines well enough to find the right one, the one where he lived. That night, I found older Helena in my kitchen, just sitting there, drinking coffee like she belonged. You're getting better, she said, but not fast enough. I'm trying. I know. But there's something you need to understand. The reason you can do this, the reason you're slipping between timelines, is because of him. She pointed toward my son's room. He's what they call a quantum anchor, a person who exists identically in every timeline. His death is a fixed point precisely because he's so stable. The universe is trying to correct for his existence. That's not possible. You're living proof it is. You're his mother in every timeline. But you're the only version of yourself who can see across timelines. The only one who might be able to change what seems unchangeable. Why me? Because you were there. At the moment of his birth. At the moment the timelines branched. You saw it happen. Saw him exist in multiple states simultaneously. Your consciousness split along with reality. Most people's minds would break. Yours adapted. She finished her coffee. You have 5 years. Use them. Study the nexus points. Find the variable. Because if you don't, you'll watch him die 48 times. Once in each timeline you're connected to. And you'll remember every single death. She left. I sat in my kitchen, thinking about what she'd said. My son was a quantum anchor, fixed across realities. And his death was fixed too. Unless I could find the one variable that changed everything. I went to his room, watched him sleep. He looked peaceful, unaware of the impossible burden he carried just by existing. I pulled out the compass, held it over him. The needle stopped completely. Perfect stillness. He was the center, the fixed point around which all timelines rotated. And somehow I had to figure out how to move an immovable point. The next morning, March 14th of this year, the field trip happened exactly as I remembered. I chaperoned. Ms. Holloway's class went to the zoo. My son fed the giraffes. Stood with Evan wearing the shirt he'd lost. Every detail matched my memory perfectly. Because I wasn't remembering. I was experiencing it for the first time. The timeline had finally caught up to my memory. At the penguin exhibit, I saw the sign. Memory and time, a neuroscience journey. It was real. I walked through it. Read the displays about how consciousness processes time, how memory isn't linear, how some people experience time differently. At the end of the exhibit, there was a guest book. I flipped through it. Hundreds of signatures, all saying the same thing. For my son, to save my daughter, so she'll live, so he won't die. Parents. All of them parents. All of them like me. All of them trying to save their children from fixed points. All of them failing. I signed my name, added my own message. Timeline 48, March 14th. He lives. I didn't know if it was true. Didn't know if I'd succeed where 47 other versions of myself had failed. But I had 5 years to figure it out. 5 years to become someone who could see all possibilities and choose the right one. 5 years to do the impossible. I found my son at the gift shop. He was looking at a stuffed giraffe. Can I get this? Of course. He hugged it to his chest. I'm going to name him Lucky. Why Lucky? Because that's what we are. We get to be together. In this timeline and all the others. He shouldn't know about the timelines. Shouldn't understand any of this. But he did. Because he was like me. Aware. Awake. Living in the spaces between realities. I'm going to keep you safe. I promised. I know, he said. But Mom, what if the only way to save me is to let me go? I didn't have an answer. Not then. But I had 5 years to find one. 5 years to learn how to hold on and let go simultaneously. 5 years to understand what it meant to exist in all timelines at once. We drove home. My husband made dinner. Our son did homework. Everything normal. Everything real. For now. That night, I opened my journal. Wrote down everything I'd learned. Everything I'd experienced. Every timeline I'd touched. The compass sat beside me, needle spinning slowly, measuring frequencies I was only beginning to understand. I was just getting started. Just beginning to grasp what I could do. What I had to do. Somewhere, in a timeline I hadn't found yet, my son lived past his 12th birthday. Somewhere, I succeeded. I just had to find that somewhere. And bring it here, to this timeline, to this reality, to this moment, where my son was alive and safe and mine, where I was still me, still sane, still fighting. I had 5 years, and I was going to use every single one of them, every second, every shift, every slip between realities, because that's what mothers do. We find the impossible, and we make it possible. Even if it means living 1,000 lifetimes to save one life. Even if it means losing ourselves to find our children. Even if it means accepting that reality is bigger and stranger and more terrible than we ever imagined. I closed the journal. Tomorrow, I'd start the real work. Tomorrow, I'd begin mapping timelines systematically. Tomorrow, I'd figure out how to save him. But tonight, I'd just be his mother. In this timeline. In this moment. Where he was sleeping safely down the hall. Where the future was still uncertain. Where anything was possible. Even the impossible.